Hello, hello. Testing, testing. One, two, three. Hey guys, this is Pete Lee here. We're gonna get started in a couple of minutes. I just want to, wait a few more minutes and let people sort of get settled in. And before we start the presentation, I would just like to open up the chat window so that you guys can introduce yourselves quickly. Also, I want to make sure that the audio is working fine. So if you don't mind just sending me a quick message in the chat window to let me know if everything is okay so far. And then we'll start in a couple minutes. Okay, guys? Thank you. Hey everyone, so I'm just going to ask you one more time. If you don't mind just typing me a short message to let me know if your audio is okay or not. I just want to make sure before we get started, okay? Please and thank you. Okay, hello everyone. So we're gonna get started now. I figure people are gonna, sort of jump in and join us as we go along, but I don't want to keep everyone waiting too long. It is pretty late after all, and so we're gonna get into the webinar presentation tonight. Presented by Selling Toronto, and we're going to be talking about Oshawa specifically. So I figure there's people on here that are interested in flipping. I figured that there's people that are interested specifically in Oshawa or in the Durham region. And, I hope we're going to provide a lot of value for you. And today we're going to introduce myself and also my guest. So for you guys who are not familiar, my name is Peter, or I go by Pete Lee as well, depending on how you want to say it. So I am a realtor here in the city, in Toronto and the GTA area. The brokerage that I work with is called Young Realty. We are based downtown, and typically the type of agents that work at Young Realty are generally very progressive and forward-thinking type people. I've also invested in real estate as well too since the mid-2000s, and we do that, sort of pretty regularly, and we help people invest as well too, and we try to bring an investment approach to buying and selling even for their own houses. So, rest assured, we're going to try to help you guys become great investors as well too. And if you've seen my show, it's called Selling Toronto. It's on YouTube and Facebook. Those are the primary sources that I use for my online marketing, and that's probably what brought you here in the first place. So I would just want to say thank you to everyone for watching and for signing up and for showing up tonight. I know it's pretty late and everything, but we promise we won't take too much time, and we'll offer as much value as much as possible. Okay. So I told you that I did mention in the last email that I was going to have a guest on the show, and it's actually my business partner. His name is Andy Tran. So he is a former home inspector and now education manager at Carson and Dunlop. For those who aren't familiar, Carson and Dunlop is probably the most well-known and preeminent home inspection company in Toronto, and they also do education for home inspectors all across North America. So if you ask any home inspectors in Canada or the US, chances are they've probably heard of Carson and Dunlop before. So we're going to have Andy jump on and talk about some things, how we're going to add value to properties, how to identify good homes for flipping purposes and for investment purposes. And he also runs a website as well too. He's got a blog, and he's got some content over there about teaching people how to legalize suites. So for a lot of people who may not be familiar from an investment point of view, there is a difference between having legal basement suites and suites that are not legal. And there's obviously some benefits and some risks. There's some benefits to having a legal basement, and then there's some risks involved in not having a legal basement. So he'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But again, we're going to keep the presentation as brief as possible. Andy, do you want to jump on and say hi quickly for a little bit here, just to say hi?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. This is Andy here. And yeah, Peter provided a pretty good introduction of what I do and what I'm currently doing as well with regards to secondary suites. So hopefully I can provide you some information that can definitely add value to your investment.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks, Andy. So Andy's going to join us a little bit later on, and he's going to talk a little bit about how to identify houses, particularly ones in Oshawa. So some quick housekeeping things here. Again, like we said, it's pretty late, so we're going to try to keep the presentation as short as possible. We're going to try to be as direct and hit the point as possible, as quickly as possible, and hopefully you can see what it is that we're talking about in terms of Oshawa being a good investment. So we are going to move very fast, so I would encourage you to grab a pen and paper and maybe take some notes, or take some notes on your computer or whatnot, because we are going to go quick. And if you have any questions, please save those for later in the chat box, or you can send direct emails to me if you don't want everyone else sort of seeing what your question is. We can be a little bit more discreet that way as well too. So we're going to get right into it, guys, and I'm going to give you the key takeaways that I want to have. So key takeaways after this is all done is I want you guys to think that Oshawa is a good investment, and it's actually the perfect time to do so. If you're wanting to get into the game for the very first time, this is sort of a good test area for you to get into, because the properties are not too expensive, and you don't have to spend a ton of money on the renovation, and the clientele isn't so particular about the finishing out there. So it's kind of a great opportunity if you're getting into it for the first time. What we do with our investors is we help and we guide and we mentor them on top of, actually doing the work. So we acquire the property, we guide them throughout the process, we advise them on what the best thing to do or the best way to do it. And then we also advise on the exit strategy as well too. So that's something that I want, to sort of convey to you guys before the end of this presentation. And also at the end, I'm going to have a sign up. So what we started to do is we started to take investors out as groups to view properties. So we actually had a pretty good one last week. It was a good turnout. And, we were taking people around to show houses and tell them what we think about it, basically show our methodology on how we decide whether a property is a good investment or not, how much money you should actually put into it, what type of work you should actually do. So we basically, walk you through the process from beginning to end. And, we basically stay your partner pretty much the whole time when it comes to investing in property. So I hope that we can convey all of that in this presentation today. Before we even really get into it, I just want to provide a little bit of inspiration to everybody. I saw this quote a little while back ago, and it always made sense to me. Real estate is one of those things that you just want to buy, and you'd be surprised at the number of clients that I come across who said, I should have bought 10 years ago, or I should have bought 5 years ago. And, they just completely sort of missed the boat. But, eventually we got them into things that are doing well today. But I just hear it all the time. And, if you're one of those people that has always been sitting on the sidelines, we hope that this presentation and this webinar will inspire you to take action. So, and then before we even get really into it, I want to say one thing about this man here. Obviously, I don't know if everyone has heard in the news recently that the Trump Tower in Toronto is not doing so well. So they basically defaulted on their loan, and they're kind of wanting to steer away from Mr. Trump, who's become very, very controversial. So he's always been about licensing real estate. So I would say, don't license real estate. You want to own it, you want to control it, and you want to profit from it. Because in this case here, he's losing control, not just on the business side, but on the political side as well too. So, and don't say stupid, fill in the blank. Okay, so let's try to avoid doing what Trump has done so far, and maybe we'll get you to be successful real estate mogul as well. Okay, so we're going to get into the presentation right now. So, a lot of people seem to have questions, and they seem to wonder why Oshawa. Why would Oshawa be a good investment opportunity? We've heard so many bad things about it. It's a blue-collar town. It doesn't look pretty. There's just a lot of not so good things. But I would say that that's actually a benefit. That's actually a good thing, because a lot of people, when they have those bad and negative perceptions, that they will actually stay away. So that ends up becoming less competition for you. By the time people actually know about Oshawa being a great opportunity, by that time it's probably going to be too late. And we're starting to see that that wave of investment coming from Toronto is quickly gobbling up a lot of property in Oshawa. But it's still a good time to get in right now, and that's why we're talking about it. So the Oshawa Center is their central mall down there. So it's kind of like their Yorkdale or their Eaton Center, and they're going through a massive revitalization down there. And you gotta follow sort of what the commercial guys are doing, because they're basically anticipating future demand. And the mall has all the brands that we would have here, brands like H&M, Bombay, which is, these are typically not brands that you would see in a blue collar town. And, to invest $230 million into this revitalization, that's big. And that's a big vote of confidence. And then you have Starbucks down there. Oshawa would probably be typically a Tim Hortons type of town, but now we're starting to see Starbucks sort of popping up all over the place. Reason being is they want to service the clientele. So the clientele is becoming more and more white collar. They're moving out there, and because of the affordability, but they don't mind commuting into the city for work. So we're seeing a lot of early signs out there that that Oshawa is going to be big, and things are going to happen over the next little while. And we should also talk about the education institutions out there. They've got three major ones. They've got Trent University, they've got Durham College, and they've got the University of Institute of Technology. So if you're into student rentals, that could be a big thing as well too. If cash flow is what you're interested in, that's big as well. So we would have a separate conversation about that if you're into that. Or you can come out on a tour and we can discuss more. But the key here, of course, is we're talking about affordability, right? So, with average prices in Toronto just, taking off and skyrocketing, essentially Oshawa is pretty much, trading at about half the price of Toronto, but it's only about 30 minutes away. So, that's a really, really sort of big plus, and we're going to get into a little bit more of the factors on why we like it so much. So what we like about it is obviously the distance. It's 30 minutes literally by car or by train from Toronto. So it's it's in a really, really prime location. 30 minutes. I can't even, it takes me about 30 minutes to go from downtown on the subway, to go from downtown to North York. So time-wise, it's about the same. And then it's going to become more and more acceptable for people to live in Oshawa and to work in Toronto. The 407 extension in the north is a big factor too. They're still working on that right now, still under construction. So they're basically trying to alleviate some of the rush hour traffic on the 401. And my understanding is that it's actually going to be a public toll road. So either it's going to be subsidized, or specifically, I think it's going to be owned by the government. So it's not going to be the same rates as what people are paying for the 407 currently. So it is a sort of a budget 407, which is a big plus for the region. Oshawa itself is a self-contained city, so it's not exactly a suburb of Toronto. It's actually a city of its own, right? So that's why you see the mall revitalization. You see all these big box stores building up there, because they want people to stay in the city. But then if they want to go into Toronto for some specific reason, they can do that. And Oshawa is also the largest city in Durham, so it acts sort of as the central core of the Durham region. And like anything, if it's a capital, it's going to do well. What we really like about the properties in Oshawa is that the prime location ones. So there's properties in the beaches area. So there is a beach in Oshawa, and the properties there are typically very undervalued. So imagine buying in the beaches in Toronto, literally about 15 years ago, then you would have been able to buy at a discount, and you can do that in Oshawa now. Also, other prime undervalued locations are in the core, around the mall, in the downtown area. There's a lot of old property. There's a lot of areas that need gentrification, and that's really what we're looking at here. And those are where the opportunities, because properties are old, and it's time for the city to get a refresher. Okay, and we're going to talk quickly about who's buying in. So obviously we're looking at a lot of young families who can't afford to buy in Toronto or even in Whitby of all places. They're looking at Oshawa these days because it's a lot cheaper. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people are maybe losing out on properties in Toronto, and then they're sort of bringing their money to Oshawa, and they become the people that are the bullies out there. So we're starting to see that type of movement. If you're into nature and country, that's where you want to be living. You want to be living in the Durham region because you can easily, access campsites, cottages, all that type of thing. Go hunting, go fishing. That's a really big thing out in Durham. And also something that a lot of people aren't really talking about is the fact that there are people that were originally from Oshawa. And so now that, they moved into the city because they wanted to, get a job and be closer and everything. But then now that they're married and have kids, it's actually okay for them to move back to Oshawa with their kids. Plus the property is so much cheaper. So, it just makes a lot of sense, right? So, and it's not too far away. And then of course we have investors out there. The investors are out there because the rental rates are so high. We're not really gonna get into that too much today, but all we'll say is that renting is pretty easy out there in terms of attracting tenants, and the rental rates are high, but the property prices are very low. So in that case, if you can find the right property and we can get the rents high, you can cash flow on a month-to-month basis. Then we have flippers, which is what we're talking about here today. people who are buying up property and sort of gentrifying, the entire area, gentrifying the city, and just trying to attract a whole different crowd and a whole new audience of people. So basically, the Starbucks crowd. Here's some quick numbers just to compare. We're gonna do this contrast thing. So the Toronto average we're looking at, these are the most recent stats that came out in May of 2016. Toronto was 782,000. Depends who you ask. Some areas it's probably a lot higher than that, and in some areas it's a little bit lower than that. That number is a little bit deceiving because Toronto is so large, and so that average number is kind of, it's kind of hard to gauge exactly. It depends on which neighborhood you're looking at. Then as we get further and further out of the city, you got Pickering at 583. We got Ajax at 585. Pickering and Ajax are pretty much the same municipality in terms of price. And then you got Whitby, surprisingly, at 603,000, which is more expensive than Pickering and Ajax, surprisingly. And then you have Oshawa at 450, pretty much at 150,000 discount compared to Whitby, when Oshawa is just literally just like at the doorstep of Whitby. So, it doesn't, there seems to be a big gap in the price difference, especially when you look at it compared to Toronto. And so that's what people are doing. They're starting to move out there, and you want to anticipate that demand. You want to be ahead of the game. Okay, and here's some sort of retroactive numbers that we can look at for Oshawa specifically. Again, these are average prices, but I'm just using it for presentation purposes, okay? So you can see that the growth was somewhat slow between 2013 and 2014. It was pretty much just standard numbers, and then all of a sudden between 14 and 15 it just blew up. It blew up into double digits, which was a very quick spurt. That's an exceptionally fast spurt for Oshawa, because Oshawa is typically known to be, sort of flat or just growing very, very slowly. So what you can see there is that, and then it continues to accelerate into 2016. We can see that even though the prices are going up, they still continue to keep accelerating, which is sort of prime targets for flipping purposes, because you want that fast acceleration in a short amount of time. Or even for investors, if you're buying and holding, obviously who wouldn't want fast appreciation, right? So that's what we're looking at here. And I know a lot of people will think there's a lot of everywhere you buy is expensive and it's going up a lot. But the key difference here for Oshawa is that the affordability factor is so much lower. It's just so much cheaper, right? So you can make your money work better and harder for you when you can buy at a cheaper price. I mean, Toronto, you'll probably get higher dollar gains, but out in Oshawa you'll get huge sort of percentage gains. And we're still bullish on Oshawa probably for the next little while. Here's a quick little image that my buddy sent to me when we were talking about Oshawa. So I'll give you guys just a few minutes to look at that. And I thought it was pretty funny. So yeah, so again, back to the whole perception thing. So, it's actually a good thing if you're an investor that there are people who still think that way and, have that perception, because then you can get into the game early. Okay, so that's actually a really strong benefit, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Okay, so the opportunity. The opportunity that we want to convey to you is that you can buy cheap. What I really like about Oshawa is the fact that sellers are somewhat motivated to sell. What you have is a lot of elderly people who've been living there for sort of decades, and then you have people who actually don't want to live in Oshawa anymore. They want to move more out into the country. So you get the sense that because the prices have gone up so much, that people who've been sitting in these properties, they're very much tempted to sell. And so it's a little bit a different picture compared to Toronto, where people are sort of holding on to their properties pretty much as long as possible because everybody knows it's going to continue to go up. But out there, we get the sense that people are very motivated and willing to sell because they see an opportunity to make money. So why wouldn't they put their house up for sale? What we also encourage is we would definitely promote people to buy a detached property if possible, because that's what people are moving out to the country for. They're moving out to Oshawa, in order to get a piece of land, to buy a home with privacy, so their kids can run and play. People are not necessarily moving out there for density, although we are starting to see density out there. We're starting to see townhouses sort of coming out, new townhouses coming out for sale. And then potentially maybe in the future, we might even start seeing condos too. So you definitely want to get in the game for a detached property as soon as possible. And we saw this pattern happening in Toronto, and we will probably continue to see the same pattern happening in Oshawa. So there is bidding wars happening out there as well too, just to let you guys know. There's bidding wars everywhere, literally, but it's really just a matter of whether the numbers make sense for you. We think that the bidding wars are still very manageable out there. They're not crazy, but I just want to prepare people that if you are thinking about becoming an investor or working with us out in Oshawa, that there is bidding wars. It's just a matter of whether the numbers still make sense and whether you believe in the future of Oshawa. So over time, $10,000, $20,000 more is not going to make a huge difference, especially if you're cash flowing it on a month-to-month basis. We definitely recommend older homes, and that's sort of where Andy sort of comes into the picture, where he's going to help look at the properties and assess whether there's anything serious or dangerous that we have to look out for. Obviously, we're into revamping and adding value to properties. Like when we showed properties to the investors last week, there was a lot of houses that were just sort of underutilized. Like they weren't making use of all the house and all the space. And as we mentioned before, people are moving out there for the space and for the house and for the land, right? So we definitely want to be prepared and start accommodating families who need that extra space by expanding the footprint or creating a legal basement suite so they can rent it out to a tenant as well too. What we see in Oshawa is basically a 1 to 2 year window in order to flip or buy investments at a reasonable price. As we saw in the quick stats there, obviously, if you'd gotten in a little bit earlier, it would have been better, but we're sort of at a tipping point right now in the market where we can see in Oshawa that it's just not slowing down. And that's generally the time you want to go in, because you want to ride that wave, you want to ride that momentum, get those gains, also suck in, also get the high rental rates as well too, if you're looking to be a landlord. Okay, so we're moving pretty quick here, guys. So we're not going to have too many more slides, and now we're going to talk about the 3 strategies. So the strategies that we're talking about. So basically, we think that there's a strategy that's right for every type of investor in Oshawa. Whether you're thinking short term, whether you're thinking long term, there's great opportunities out there. So if you're interested in doing a straight flip, so basically buying a property and then renovating as quickly as possible, you're looking at a 3 to 6 month time frame. And the beauty of that is you can sort of keep turning the properties over and over and over until the market becomes mature and you move on to the next location. Second strategy is the long flip. We particularly like this one the most because what happens is if the market continues the way it is, in a span of 1 to 3 years, you're going to be able to get some pretty big appreciation during that time. And what you can do is you can actually rent out the property, during that time, and then you do the big renovation right before you're ready to sell. So the exit strategy. So we really like that, and we're going to be working with investors in Oshawa for projects like that, where you can actually buy the property and just rent it out right away, or just do some small fixes and not do the big fix until the end. So basically, you spend all the money on the house, and then you save the money to do the renovation later when you're about to sell. And then the final strategy is for cash flow people who are really into cash flow. I know a lot of people are. You could still achieve cash flow in Oshawa right now, or at a minimum, you're going to be able to cover all your expenses. So basically, you're going to have somebody that's going to pay your mortgage. Obviously, we recommend splitting the house, buying a bungalow and splitting the top and the bottom sections and getting more income that way. Or if you're interested in doing student rentals, they're a little bit more cumbersome or a little bit more difficult to deal with, but you definitely get more money for student rentals. So we can definitely discuss that. And with buy and hold, we don't know when the exit strategy is, because people just want to get that monthly cash flow and they want to hold assets. So that's definitely a really, really good way to go as well. Okay, so as a team, our value is, we obviously analyze the market pretty deeply, and we understand sort of where and when to buy is the best time to acquire the property. We generally, filter out good ones and bad ones, and we generally assess which neighborhood is ready for to be purchased, or which areas are better to be purchased later. So we sort of help mitigate that risk for you guys when it comes to assessing the properties. We generally try to keep it as easy as possible, as smooth and as straightforward. We want to consider ourselves to be a one-stop shop, and we are also investing ourselves as well too. So we're looking to build partners and investors that we can work with, and we also pair up other investors with the same investing objectives. And definitely we also start thinking about the exit strategy when we're buying the property as well too, even if it's a buy and hold investor. Okay, so enough talking from me. I'm gonna bring on Andy here, who's gonna discuss a little bit more about the physical structures and houses themselves. And then hopefully you guys will be interested in seeing property together with us, and we'll give you a better picture of what it is that we're talking about specifically.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Peter. So before I begin, I just want to share a little quick story about myself and my personal situation and how I personally am involved with the city of Oshawa. So I've been heavily invested in real estate also since about the mid-2000s. So starting in 2006, doing pre-construction condo investments. I owned 2 properties in the city of Hamilton, which we also know is a very hot city, as well as doing a flip in the beaches area of Toronto. And I've actually liquidated all of my investments, and my next strategy is to go to Oshawa, just because I feel that in terms of the amount of gain that can be achieved in Oshawa is going to be a lot higher than in all these other places, including Hamilton, which we know is very hot. So that's my personal story, it's definitely something that I would put out there with the information that I have, and hopefully bring in other people who are interested as well. So as Peter mentioned earlier, I am a former home inspector, and right now I do the education management at Carson Dunlop. And so I have a lot of background in terms of houses. My background is in building science, and I'm very interested in houses and how they function and all the systems and components within a house. So when we're looking at Oshawa, the types of houses that we're looking at basically are the old sort of post-war houses, the bungalows with the big lots, and also some of the well-built semi-detached houses. The reason why we like those houses is because they're really well built. And with the bungalows, you have such a big lot and such a big footprint that it's very easy to increase the function of the property to get the value out of it. So for example, putting in a legal basement suite, or even in the future, if you wanted to really change the function, is to add a second story top up. So in addition to all the market appreciation gains that you can get from the actual market itself, you can actually force appreciation by really changing the function of the property. And that's why we really like those houses. In terms of the actual opportunities, what we're looking at is there's several different options. You can simply go in there and do cosmetic renovations. And when I say cosmetic renovations, what I mean is things like paint, trim, flooring. But I also mean things like bathrooms and kitchens. For the most part, people want to have modern stuff, right? So you have these houses that were really well cared and maintained for the past 40, 50 years, but frankly, all of the finishes right now are outdated. So the kitchen counters, the kitchen cabinets, that stuff has to go. The old sort of pink tub, that stuff has to go and brought in with new finishes, and then that way you get the new buyers that are interested in that. Okay, so that's sort of the basic renovation. In terms of functional renovations, where you can really gain value is by changing the actual number of spaces and rooms. So for example, you have a lot of 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom type of bungalows, and they can easily be converted to 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, for example. And then what I personally am interested in, and I actually built an entire business out of this, is doing consultation and designs for putting in legal secondary suites. So essentially, you're taking an existing space and turning it into a legal basement apartment. And that becomes very appealing for other investors who want to rent it out and get additional cash flow. That's something that you might be interested in. And it's also very appealing for an end user, somebody who wants to buy the house, but maybe they want to have a little bit of extra income to help cover the cost of the mortgage, utility costs, property taxes, etc. And so that's something that I've started as a business for the past year or so, and it's something that a lot of people are interested in just because of that higher demand. And then there's a lot of policy changes with the province as well regarding that. So the things that we look out for when we're going and looking at properties is we want to look for houses, obviously, with dry basements if we're going to put in secondary suites. And in addition to cosmetic things that people pay attention to, one of the things that we like to pay attention to are non-cosmetic things that can add a lot of value to the house. So, a lot of people don't think about things like the furnace, the roof, the wiring system. And as a former home inspector and as a home inspection instructor right now, that's something that I really pay a lot of attention to. So things like, as I mentioned, the roof, that could be $5,000, $10,000. Furnace, that could be $10,000 in wiring. So those are the things that we want to pay attention to because that's the stuff we also get value from. And then we focus more on the cosmetics when we're actually doing the upgrades. In terms of the legalizing of the basement suites, there's actually a really unique opportunity in Oshawa right now due to a current zoning bylaw exemption where they allow former houses, illegal suites that were constructed before 2014 to actually be easily converted from a bylaw perspective. And that's the strategy that we're going to go in as well when we're looking at properties for ourselves when we're buying them and doing the renovations, is to use that exemption strategy. I was actually at City Council earlier last week to discuss that proposal to provide affordable housing, and that's something that they're going to move forward with for another 2 years. And sitting in council, I also saw a lot of proposals for a lot of development that's happening in Oshawa. All right, so just to quickly wrap up regarding the secondary suites, the benefits is that you do get higher rents and more cash flow. Again, it's very appealing to investors, and then you also remain in good standing with the city, with your lender and your insurer, and we think it's a really good strategy as an investment vehicle.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, great. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.
So if anybody has any questions specific to, basements and legalizing suites and so forth, you can definitely head over to Andy's website at suiteadditions.com. You can email him over there or even catch up on his blog where he's actually writing a lot about how to convert spaces into, more functional uses. So that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, I think, I figure you probably don't really want to sit here all night just listening. It's been a long day. So we wanted to make it as short and direct as possible. Essentially, the point is we're saying, Oshawa, from what we've seen, Oshawa is an incredible investing opportunity, especially if you're trying to get into that, type of game for the very first time. It's a great opportunity. Toronto has just become very expensive. Don't get me wrong, you can make a lot of money flipping property in Toronto, but it just takes a lot more capital. And it becomes a little bit harder to qualify for mortgages and things like that. And so, Oshawa is prime right now. And so that's why we've, started doing property tours as well too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this sign up form that I have for you guys in case you're interested in coming out on Sunday to take a look. All you got to do is just register on my website. So if you look at the pop-up box there, all you got to do is just click the join button and head over to my website, or you could just head over to my website at petely.com. So it's PETELY.com, and you can enter your name just like you did before for the webinar, and you can sign up for that. So we start at 10 a.m. In the morning. Reason being is we just don't want to disrupt people's weekends. So we want to, show as much property in the morning time, and then you can go off and have fun or do whatever fun thing you have planned for the weekend. So it was quite successful last week, like I said, and we're ready to do another one. If you guys are interested, we'll show you some great properties. We'll show you some great opportunities. We'll show you what to do with it. And we hope that you will gain a lot of value and you'll want to work with us when it comes to flipping and investing. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you for listening to the presentation. I'm going to open up the chat box, and I'm also going to ask you to send me any emails that you have or any questions specifically that you have to peter@youngrealty.ca. We do have limited spots for the tour, so I would urge you to sign up if you're interested in coming out and looking at property with us, because simply we just can't take too many people, otherwise it just looks too crazy. But if you're definitely interested and you're serious and you like what you hear here today and you want to learn more, then you definitely want to sign up as soon as possible. So you can click the join button right now, or you can just head over to my website, or you can even email me directly. That would be fine as well too. So if you guys have any questions, I'm gonna go back to the chat box, and I'm gonna let you guys, weigh in. So if you guys have any questions, then please type them in here. Okay, so we got a question here from Tank. I hope I pronounced your name right. So he's asking how long the tour will take. So we generally move pretty quickly. We take about a half hour per property. So when we start at 10, we're pretty much usually done around 12 or 12:30. We're pretty efficient with our time, and we generally don't waste a lot of time. So, I would say 2 hours. 2 hours would be a good number, and we generally look at about 3 or 4 properties. And I think you have a pretty good idea from an intro point of view. So in response to your question, Tank, it's about 2 hours. Do we have any other questions? Does anybody have any other questions about the webinar or about the tours in general, or about what we do? Okay, so I just want to, if there's no more questions, I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody for coming out to the webinar tonight. I really appreciate it. I know it's pretty late and everything, and thanks for engaging with us and taking in this information. So again, if you're interested in the tour, please send me an email or head over to my website. I'm going to type it here quickly. peatlee.com, where you can actually sign up for the tour. We actually do have limited spots, and so if you are interested, please do so immediately or as quick as you can, so that we can reserve a spot for you this coming Sunday at 10 a.m. So thank you very much again for joining us, and I hope you guys have a great evening and a good week, and hopefully we'll see you on Sunday as well. Take care.